We continue today with the 7th chapter of the book of Judges, Shoftim Perek Zayin. Chapter begins with, we're in the middle of the leadership of Gidon, who yesterday defied the idolatry, the Baal that much of Bnei Yisrael were worshiping. He destroyed altar of Baal. He was asked by God to lead the Jewish people in battle. He did so. He hasn't done so yet, but he asked God for signs. He didn't want to be the leader. It's indicative, like we said yesterday, of Moshe. And he has gathered an army together. And that's where we can continue now with the beginning of chapter 7. Vayashkem Yerubbaal hu Gidon. And the next day, Yerubbaal, remember, he was given that name because he was the one who fought with Baal, with the god, the idol that much of Bnei Yisrael was worshiping. They camped at this place called Ein Charod, which was, while the camp of Midian was in a place to the north of him. Interesting, the word Charod, like Chered or Charedi, means somebody who's fearful, somebody who's scared. And something that we've seen from Gidon is a sense almost of fear so far. He's asked God for 3 signs that he will be victorious and that Bnei Yisrael will be victorious. Pasuk Bet, verse 2, Vayomer Adonai Gidon, Rab ha'am asher itach, mititiet mijan biadam, ken yitpala er alai Yisrael lemor, yadi hoshiali. God said, there are too many troops with you, for me to deliver minyan. Because what's going to happen is, if you have 10,000 soldiers and they have 5,000 soldiers, what are Bnei Yisrael going to say? Kochi va'otzem yodi. It is because of my strength, my might, that we won this battle. So God says, I don't want you to have these 20,000, these 50,000 soldiers from all different tribes. I want it to be evident and obvious that I was the one who led Bnei Yisrael in battle. And thus, and so therefore announce, anybody who's scared, anybody who's fearful, which is sort of what we have in the book of Dvarim. We say that the people who were given pardons from war after people who had just engaged and not married or built a house and had not yet lived in it. And other places we say anybody who's fearful can go back. And so people can leave Mount Gilad, and 22,000 of the troops left. So 10,000 remain. Continuing verse 4, Vayomer Adonai el Gidon, Od ha'am rav. There's still too many troops. There's too many troops. So what do you need to do? Go down to the water, and anyone who tells you this one is to go with you, that one shall go with you. And anyone who might tell you this one is not to go with you, that one shall not go with you. God says, I'm going to tell you who's going to go to battle. So Gidon takes them down to the water. Gidon kol asher yalok bil shono min hamayim kasher yalok hakeleb tatzigo tol levad v'chol asher yichra al birkav mishtot. God says to Gidon, anybody who goes down on their knees and laps up the water with their tongues like dogs, right? All those who go down on their knees to drink, those are the ones who will not go to war. So all of those who went down and put the water in their mouths without bending down, meaning they're still standing up, and they use their hands to pick up the water, those ones would go to battle with Gidon, and those was 300 men, right? So he's now reduced, and anybody who went onto their knees, they were excused to go home. Why this symbol? It's unclear. The common explanation given is those who went down on their knees. It was indicative of the fact that they were idol worshipers. They were used to getting on their knees and bowing down. And so but there's no clear explanation as to what it's supposed to be and why this was the sign. But the most important factor here is the fact that Gidon has gone from over 30,000 soldiers to a very small number, 300 soldiers, in order to demonstrate to Bnei Yisrael that this victory is going to be not through their might, but due to God's intervention. If they're victorious, that is. Vayomer Adonai el Gidon, b'shlosh me'ot eish hamlakim oshia etchem, natati et midjan biadech v'chol ha'am yalchu ish lemkoma. God says to Gidon, with these 300 men, I will deliver Midjan into your hands, and everybody else can go home. So these 300 men, they took provisions, right? They took food, and they took their shofarot. It's like reminding us of the first battle, the Battle of Yericho, the picture of Shmuel on the top of the mountain with his shofar there. It's reminding us of, right? The shofars remind us the early battle, the great victory of Bnei Yisrael at Yericho. That Kol Ish Yisrael Shilach Ish Lo Alav U'B'Shlosh Me'ot Ha'ish Chazik U'Machaneh Mijan Hayalo Mitachat Ba'emek. He sent everybody else home, only 300 men, and the Midianite camp was below him in the plain, which is good because they have the high ground, the high territory. That very evening, God said, "Go and attack the camp, for I have delivered this camp into your hands." But if you're afraid to attack, first go down to the camp with your attendant Fura, right? So God is telling Gidon, you should all go down. This is the time. But if you're scared, this is again indicative. And I said, this is a word. We had the word, they were Nachal Chored, Charedi, scared. The people who are not ready to battle or scared should go home. One of the themes of this chapter is the idea of fear and the idea that God is going to help you at your time of fear. It's like David HaMelech, we'll see in the book of Tehillim, as we know, it says, right? As I walk through in the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil because you are with me. Right? If he wasn't fearful in some way, then he wouldn't have to say to God, I'm not fearful because you're with me. Obviously, if he's saying, I'm not fearful because of you, there was fear other than that. And so that's what is a big theme in this chapter. Continuing in verse 11. So go down yourself, hear what the Midianites are saying, and that will strengthen you. That will give you the chizuk, chazak, the strength to go to battle. So he went down with his attendant Fura to the outposts of the warriors who were in the camp. And Midian and Amalek and Kedem, they were spread out over the plain as thick as locusts. Yesterday we talked about them coming into the camps of Bnei Yisrael, and they were like locusts, completely just destroying everything the way a swarm of locusts comes in and destroys everything. So they are everywhere. There are so many, the camels that they have, there is countless, as numerous as the sands of the sea. And we saw this before. This is the second time where we have this expression that we know, of course, from Avram, when God says to Avram, your descendants are going to be as many as the sands of the sea. It's being used in an ironic way to say, we're not the ones who are as many as sands of the sea. It's the camels of Midian and of Amalek that are as numerous as the sands of the sea. And Gidon came, and one man was telling his friend a dream. Behold, I had a dream. Takes us back to the days of Yosef. That's what Yosef says. And there was a commotion. A loaf of barley bread was whirling through the camp of Midian. And what happened is it came to a tent and it smacked the tent and it fell down and the tent turned upside down and the tent collapsed. Maybe what happened was I was the person who built that tent, because that's probably what would have happened if I had built that tent, then the tent would have collapsed. But that's not what they're saying here. The other one responded, what is this barley bread? It's not that Mark Hitler built the tent. What is it? It must be, the idea is it's a symbol of the sword of Gidon, which is coming down to destroy the camp of Midian. And when Gidon heard the dream and the interpretation, he bowed down. He said, everybody get up, because God has delivered Midian into our hands. And he divided his 300 men into 3 columns. And each one had, right? So they're everybody's got a shofar, everybody has an empty jar with a torch in each jar. And he said, watch me and do the same thing. Whatever I'm going to do, you copy me. Do the exact Same thing. The takati bashofar anochi v'chol asher iti. And when I blow my shofar, you two all around me blow it as well. Utkatem b'shofarot gam atem svivot kol hamachne v'amartem laHashem ulegidon. So I'm going to blow my shofar, then you blow your shofarot and say for the Lord, for God, and for Gidon. Vayavo Gidon u'mea ish asher ito b'tzei hamachne rosh hashmoret hatichona. And Gidon and the 100 men with him arrived at the outposts of the camp of Midian, right? Because they're split up into 3 different groups. So he's with 100 of them. And it's the beginning of the middle watch. So presumably there are 3 watches here. Each one of the night is 12 hours. So it's midnight. Each of those, right? A 12-hour day, 12-hour nighttime. So 3 watches, we'll say it's 4 hours each. So it's the middle of those 3 watches, the middle of the middle one. So that would be 6 hours in. So we'll just call it midnight is what they're trying to say. It's the darkest part of night where you can't see anything is the image that that the Tanakh is trying to give us. And what happens? Okay, so now there was just a change in the guards, and Gidon and the people are with them. They begin sounding their shofars and smashing the jars that they have with them. And the other columns began to do the same thing. They began to blow their shofars. They began to break the jars that they had. And they held the torches in their left hands and the shofarot in their right hands. And they called out a sword for God and Gidon. And they were then standing where they were, surrounding the camp. But the Midianites and the Amalekites, they started to flee. Avel Mechola al Tabat. And when the 300 horns were sound, so right, the Midianites, the Amalekites are going crazy. They don't understand what's going on. Part of what's going on here is that there's a lack of knowledge as to how many people are there, how many people are in the battle. There are only 300 of them, but they hear 300 shofarot. It's a huge noise. They see all these lights, and they think it's thousands and thousands of men who are coming to attack them. And so they're terrified. It's the middle of the night. They don't know what's going on. And they're running out of the camp and they're knocking each other over. And verse 23, Ish Yisrael min Naphtali min Asher min kol man Hashem vayirdefu achrei Midian. And now that the 300 men have made the camp crazy, then all of the rest of Bnei Israel from Naphtali and Asher, all of the people who Gidon had said, you can leave. But now they hear that the enemies are running away. They're going now and they're going to pursue the Midianites in battle. Malachim shalach Gidon b'chol har Ephraim le'mor redu l'krat Midian u'v'lechtu lahem et hamayim ad beit barav et hayarden beit Eik kol ish Ephraim v'el kedu et hamayim ad beit barav et hayarden. Gidon sent messengers to also the Ephraimites in the hill country, and he said, go down and attack the Midianites, seize all access to their water at the Jordan. And this is what the soldiers from Ephraim did. And they went down to the Jordan. They pursued the 2 kings of Midian, whose names were Orev and Ze'ev. Right, so in the Hebrew, an Orev is a raven, a Ze'ev is a wolf. I know there was a restaurant in New York. I don't know if it still exists. Wolf and Lamb. Maybe it should have been called Wolf and Raven. By Argu at Orev, Bitsura Orev at Ze'ev, Hargu b'Yekev Ze'ev. They killed Orev at the rock of Odev, and they killed Ze'ev at the wine press of Ze'ev. Maybe that's why they didn't call it that, because, they think you might get food poisoned if they refer to this chapter. For Rosh Orev Ze'ev, Heviu El Gidon Me'ever Liarden. And they brought the heads of Orev and Ze'ev from the other sides of the Jordan to Gidon. And so here we see this great victory. These were a great army, the army of Midian and Amalek, who were like the Arbeh, who had completely destroyed, devastated Bnei Israel. For years, Bnei Israel was under their control. And now, like we've had in the past, in the cycle, we had Bnei Israel subjugated, cry out to God. Here comes their savior, their messenger. He rallies them to battle. And now they've been victorious in battle. It doesn't end the story here of Gidon. At the end of the earlier stories, and we'll see, eventually we'll get there, that it talks about the end of the stories of the Shoftim. It says that there was then peace in the land for 20 years or wording such as that. And it doesn't say that here. This is not the end of the story of Gidon, even though he's been victorious in battle. And we'll continue to hear about his story come tomorrow.